Hello, welcome to BBC World News. Donald Trump has insisted the US was justified in its targeted killing of the top Iranian general Qasem Soleimani. He said he ordered the drone strike which led to his death to stop a war, not to start one. Well, Iran has threatened to respond and claims that international law gives it the right to self-defense. Let's take you straight to the situation in Baghdad right now, because thousands of people have been gathering on the streets there for the funerals of those who were killed on Friday when the missiles hit that convoy travelling near the city's international airport. Now, as for Qasem Soleimani himself, his remains will be returned to Iran for 3 days of ceremonies, and they will begin on Sunday. Preparations are also being made in Tehran, obviously, for that moment. The country's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, here he is visiting Soleimani's family. He paid his respects and issued very stern warnings about reprisals. Now, as all that is happening, the US is deploying an additional 3,000 troops to the Middle East. David Willis has this report.
American officials say the airstrike that killed Qasem Soleimani was carried out in self-defense. They say the man who's been blamed for the deaths of hundreds of Americans in the Middle East over the years was plotting a major attack on US diplomats and military personnel. At a rally last night in Florida, President Trump said that threat had now been lifted.
Qasem Soleimani has been killed, and his bloody rampage is now forever gone. He was plotting attacks against Americans, but now we've ensured that his atrocities have been stopped for good. They are stopped for good.
Iran has vowed revenge, and amid heightened tensions, the US is sending reinforcements to the region, 3,750 troops so far, and warning its citizens stationed in Iraq to get out as soon as they can. Qasem Soleimani was one of America's deadliest enemies, but the US has yet to release intelligence information supporting its claim that he was planning a major attack. Administration officials insist, however, that hundreds of Americans could have died.
They were aiming to take down significant amounts of Americans that would have undoubtedly killed locals too, Iraqis, Lebanese, Syrians perhaps, people all throughout the region. This was an attack that would have been at some scale. We can't talk much about the details, but suffice it to say the American people can know that the decision that President Trump made to take Qasem Soleimani down saved American lives.
Neither the US nor Iran favors outright war, but the Trump administration's claim that taking out one of Iran's most powerful officials will prevent further bloodshed may soon be put to the test. David Willis, BBC News, Los Angeles.
Well, concerns about the security situation in the region have prompted a response also from the British government in the last couple of hours. A statement put out changes the travel advice to British nationals. It advises now against all travel to Iraq outside of the Kurdistan region. It's also upgraded its advice on travelling to Iran. It says only essential journeys should be made. And in just the last few hours, there have been claims of another airstrike targeting a convoy of vehicles belonging to an Iranian-backed militia. It reportedly took place on the Taji Road north of Baghdad. We're just showing you where that is there on the map. A paramilitary group known as Iraq's Popular Front claimed that a medical team had been hit. Worth pointing out, though, the US-led coalition fighting Islamic State said on Saturday it did not conduct any airstrikes in the area, and in fact the Iraqi military has also said there was no airstrike. Let's just work out where this leaves us at the moment. Lina Sinjab is our Middle East correspondent. She joins us now from Beirut. And Lina, I just want to focus for a moment on the funerals beginning to take place in Baghdad. I mean, it's worth pointing out that Qasem Soleimani is, of course, Iranian, and yet embedded within the fabric of Iraq and Iraq's security position.
Yes, indeed. Qasem Soleimani's role and influence exceeded the borders of Iran. In fact, his influence traveled across the region in cities that he focused on to have Iran's presence and influence. Iraq is one of the main hubs for Iranian influence and strategic power as well, but also here in Lebanon and in Syria and in Yemen. Qasem Soleimani is seen as the man who orchestrated military operations in the region, of someone who reshaped the cities around where Iran wanted to have presence and influence as well. And he was the one who was shaping that strategy and influencing it and also implementing it on the ground.
And I mean, in a sense, you cannot exaggerate the influence of this man over the course of the last 2 decades, not just within Iran, but perhaps more significantly, as you would know well, sitting in Lebanon, of those countries neighbouring Iran.
Certainly here in Lebanon, especially with Hezbollah, the Shia armed group here that, has power in Lebanon and has presence in the parliament and in the government. Hezbollah in Lebanon is mainly orchestrated and supervised by Iran, especially directly by Qasem Soleimani. Their involvement in Syria has been instructed by Qasem Soleimani, and their operations there is all, organized and led by Soleimani. So his absence is hugely felt here. The Hezbollah denounced the killing, called him a martyr, and called on all resistance fighters in the region and beyond to be ready for retaliation.
Lina, thank you very much indeed for that. I'm going to speak now to Dr. Ali Bilgic, who is a professor at Loughborough University, specialising in Middle East and international relations. Doctor, thanks very much for joining us. We're just getting a sense there as to the significance, the influence of this one man in particular. And, OK, we've had a spike in the last few weeks of tension and conflict between the US and perhaps some organisations that would benefit very much from having Qasem Soleimani in their camp, as it were. But what do you think the US is doing and is thinking to take him out at this point?
There are 2 reasons we can think of. First of all, right now, Trump's impeachment inquiry is going on, and this is election year. And we have a pattern right now that when Trump administration is in trouble domestically, it directs our attention to foreign policy issues and stirs things up in the Middle East. But if you look at the Middle East context, we shouldn't miss the bigger picture here. Although everything looks like a confrontation between the United States and Iran, the bigger question here is the competition between Russia and the United States about who's setting the piece on the Middle East chessboard. And one of the important strategic objectives of the United States by decreasing Iranian influence in the region is to protect and help its key allies in the Middle East, and which are Saudi Arabia and Israel.
Right, and also worth pointing out, there's obviously a question as to who is managing, who is holding the hand of Iraq. Is it Iran? Is it the US?
When it comes to Iraq, we cannot talk about a unified government or nation, actually. We are talking about a country which has suffered from successive civil wars, and the balance, military and political balance right now in Iraq is hanging on a thread. And different fractions are supported by different external actors. And actually, if you look at the demonstrations in Iraq yesterday, there were some protesters who were actually celebrating the killing of Soleimani. On the other hand, there were protesters who were very unhappy about this event. So basically, what it seems right now, and given what happened in Iraq in the last few hours, the recent attack, it is getting clearer that Iraq will be the main battlefront between of these different external actors right now.
Yeah, Ali Bilgic, thank you very much indeed for that. Certainly a complex picture and, more to the point, an extremely tense one. We'll keep across that for you. We'll bring you more, of course, within the course of this bulletin as well. But I want to turn... Well, Holly Degres is a fellow at the Atlantic Council think tank and is joining me here in the studio. Holly, thanks very much for joining us. Donald Trump made it very clear in his statement. He said, I want to stop a war, not to start a war. Does that tally with what he's just done, do you think?
Absolutely not. I mean, assassinating Quds Force Commander Qasem Soleimani and saying that there was an imminent threat when we really haven't seen the evidence, and telling the world that it's a safer place now, and then seeing...
It would be realistic, though, wouldn't it, to assume that Qasem Soleimani may well have plans for targeting US positions or personnel in the area?
That is definitely a possibility, but at the same time, we're in a situation where we have an administration that has the credibility gap as wide as the Grand Canyon. Show us the evidence. And especially given the fact that we've been hearing reports now that are saying that there was no imminent threat, that this was something that was on the radar for them for a while, and it was kind of like an opportunity for them. So I think given the circumstances, given the past with the 2003 Iraq War, and that we have a president that likes to act on his emotions and angry tweets, we really need to see what's going on here, because this is definitely leading us down a path of escalation, not de-escalation.
Briefly, we heard a moment ago from Dr. Ali Bilgic, who raised this prospect of it being an electoral consideration as well at a time of impeachment. Do you sort of buy into that theory to any extent?
I mean, anything's possible with this president. We've also seen him tweet over the years when the U.S. President Barack Obama was in office that he will start a war with Iran to get reelected. Perhaps this was Trump self-projecting his views on how he would have handled things. I mean, anything really goes with this president. But what I can really say right now is that what he's done is put U.S. troops and diplomats in the region at risk.
But what he's also done, though, is to remove from the stage, if you like, a figure who's been more than a thorn in the side of the US, and for more than 2 decades. I mean, he is someone who has created a huge amount of problems for the United States in that region.
Absolutely, and that is definitely a reality, and I think there's that recognition. But at the same time, he's also been a thorn for former U.S. presidents like George W. Bush and Barack Obama, and there's certainly a reason why they never took him out, because they knew of the ramifications and how this would lead down a path of no return. And right now, given the fact that the U.S. withdrew from the Iran nuclear deal in May 2018 and imposed punitive sanctions, and on top of everything else, stopped Iran from exporting its oil, which the country calls economic warfare, has kind of shown that the U.S. is on a path of escalation, not on a path of diplomacy.
And you've brought up points that have also created something of a division between traditional allies with the U.S. and notably within Europe and the European Union. And there was no consultation, we understand, on this with those allies. I mean, they talk about coercive pressure and you need unity to do that. Is he in danger of breaking up his own sense of an alliance here?
I mean,
what's left of it?
What's left of it? Absolutely, that's the reality. What is left of it? It's not just the Iran nuclear deal. It's not the fact that he's consulted with allies. I mean, he's withdrew from the Paris Climate Accords. He's been talking about withdrawing from other things. And for Trump, it's about telling the U.S. supporters what he can do. He doesn't care if it means trotting on the feet of his allies or ignoring the warnings of the intelligence community not to do things. For Trump, it's about showing to his supporters that he can do what he wants and that he'll do it.
Holly, thank you very much. Holly Degres, thanks for joining us.